Part 2, December 10th, 2023. So if man is just sitting here looking for the pure tone, in which case, if he's resonating with that pure tone, his retina is going to stay where it belongs, or it'll go back to where it's going along. A bent metal axle will straighten itself. The birds will all sing on key at the right time. The neighbor's dog won't wake you up in the middle of the night. Hey, that almost sounds like Ezekiel 38 we were reading, where Yahweh's going to bring his people back into the land. The fruit will proliferate on the trees. The crops will just burst out of the ground. There'll be an abundance of food. Wild animals won't hurt you in the middle of the night if you just want to sleep in the woods, and all your enemies will leave you alone. That's what that sounds like. It's like that event. Somebody must find it eventually, because that's the prophecy in Ezekiel 38. And then, but it's not the whole world. You see, it's in the land. When he brings his people back in Ezekiel 37, he's going to join the houses of Israel, all 12 of them back together, and he'll never let them be separated ever again. That hasn't happened yet. So we this is in front of us, you might say. And it's like, how do we get there? Well, Ezekiel 36:23. You, Israel, you've made my Shem Het Lamed Lamed in the Ayin, in the eyes of estimating, weighing, and balancing of the Goyim, the Gentiles, amongst whom you've been scattered. Yeah, but you scattered us there. Yeah, but I kicked you out of the land because you profaned, violated, desecrated, Het Lamed Lamed, my name, my Shem, who I am. You got it wrong, and you taught it wrong, and you portrayed it wrong. You messed it up. You said I was somebody that I wasn't. So you brought devastation and destruction upon yourselves. And even if that wasn't enough, come on, get them, pirates, piratim, those people who have no regard. They break things and kill things. And he called those guys in, the Assyrians in that case, and the Babylonians, to destroy the place, kicked his people out of the land, scattered them across the face of the earth with plague and misfortune following them, the sword chasing them down, pestilence. And when I am my great name, the Shem HaGadol Kadosh, the Gadol, the great, majestic Shem of Yahweh is made Kadosh in you, by you, Bet, Atah, Bet Alef Tav Hey. When the Alef Tav is Hayed, you being the Bet, you being the other who's instead of contrary to him with him, Ezekiel 36:23. Then he brings us back to the land and turns everything around. Well, how do we do this then? How do we make his Shem Gadol? What's his Shem? Hey, there's a proverb about that, I think is where it is, or it says, what is my name and what is my son's name? It's a riddle. What is his name? Yahweh and Yahusha, right? No, wait a minute. Let's suggest there's a little more to this riddle. Come on, but that's a good answer. But let's suggest there's a little bit more to it. Yahusha said, if you've seen me, you've seen my Father. My Father and I are one. Yeah, Jesus is the Father. Woohoo! So you get the cartoon, Jesus, praying on the rock in the Garden of Gethsemane and say, hi, Dad, it's me. You. What? Me, you, what? Is Jesus the Father? Bad logic. Doesn't work. If the Father's the Alef, and Alef is a Chad, there's no bet. Unless he makes a bet. So he has to invent a bet, which is something other. And if it's something other, it's possibly something contradictory, which is why bet can mean against. So some people who study the alphabet say, oh, the letter bet's the devil. The devil is the contrary one. So if you have a chad where everything's unified and harmonious and everything's cool and good, dang, who left the door open? You got a bug come in. You got a snake crawl in. It's the devil. How'd he get here? That's the letter bet. No, some people say, well, the letter tet's the devil then, because the tet's round and snakes coil up. And it's like, that's not how it works. That's bad understanding of the language. If you understand the language, you understand why they say that, but it's a bad understanding of the language. It's incomplete. The point is, bet is simply other. Other. How do you get an other if you're echad? Zimzum, you've got to stick something in, make a void where the other can exist within the allowance of the echadness. But remember, we're trying to find how do we get that tone of frequency where the retina will just jump back on and press itself against the sclera and say, I'm back, I'm home. It's almost a picture of Yahusha leaving his heavenly abode, coming down to earth, having adventures and things going amok, and then him, I'm out of here, skedaddles back to heaven, and I'm back. How'd it go? Oh, I got some stories, I'll tell you. And the angels come around and he tells them, campfire stories about the times when he was on earth. And he says, I'm going back. And this time, boy, I'm going to wallop those guys. Different. It's going to be different this time. You're going back? Oh, yeah. Is that the scenario? Is that what's going on? Well, that's this bet going on a voyage, Gimel, to Dalet the earth, as the Hay, the man who would be born of the woman, the Vav being born of the Hay, the woman, through the Dalet portal of the birth canal, as he Gimeled to be the Bet, to the Bet universe from the Alef heavens. I'm just giving value to the letters. And then he was end up getting killed, Zion, put to the weapon, killed, and then thrown into the tomb. They took the dead body and tossed it into the sepulcher. The het, how's a het a sepulcher? Because the word sepulcher is not just a crypt or a grave, but it's a low gravelly sound like dragging a shovel across the asphalt or sticking a shovel into a pile of gravel rocks. That sound, hey, that's how you pronounce het. Isn't that interesting? Het, as in Hanukkah. It's not Chanukah or Hanukkah. It's Hanukkah. Het Nun Kaf happens to be going on present tense in some people's regard. Just so you know, playing off of that for a moment, the light and the dark. Chanak, Het Nun Kaf, just so you know, as a word in the dictionary, means to be dedicated or educated. Educated about what? Kra. Gather together and learn how to read. Educated about the Torah, the only thing worth getting educated about, which includes everything else. But anyway, so here's another kind of a riddle. If Yeshua says, if you've seen me, you've seen my Father, what did he mean? We're going to get to that maybe next week. I'm just posing that as a riddle. Think about that. If you hear those words in English, if you have seen me, then, based on the if, you have seen my Father. But I thought his Father was invisible. Well, except Ezekiel and Moses saw him sitting on a throne with his feet, and he's got a head and a torso and hands on the... There's a friend sent me this book by Maimonides called The Guide for the Perplexed. Really interesting. When I was down here last week, I listened to about an hour of it. And Maimonides is one of the world's most famous rabbis, lived a few hundred years ago. And he wrote this book for a protege, a young man that wanted to learn about stuff that he knew. I highly recommend it. It's wonderfully, it's read. It's for free to read. But the Lubavitch has made it available. But the point is, he goes through chapters like 5 through 10 and just telling you a certain word, like the word sit, shin bet. Yeah, like they saw him sitting on a chair, sitting on a throne. He says, but in Hebrew, the word sit doesn't necessarily mean you have an object that's sitting, shin tav, or shin bet. I've got my posterior on a platform. That's English. To sit means to remain forever, never to be dislodged. Well, why didn't he say that? He did, and he said it in Hebrew, but when they translate it, they put the word sit. So you think he has a body in a chair, sitting on his throne. But see, in Hebrew, each one of those words means something else. And so this guide for the perplexed by Maimonides goes through a whole list of different words explaining what does head mean? What does sit mean? What does throne mean? What does feet mean? And then you have this sapphire pavework, like brickwork, like setting tiles under his feet arrayed out in front of him, sitting on his throne. Is there actually a humanoid-looking, an anthropomorphized deity, like the image of man, sitting in a chair in the heavens? Well, we read that in English, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's what it says in Hebrew. The words can be translated that way, but what's it mean? What did Moshe or Ezekiel see? So we can't even go there unless somehow we can get into this mind of Elohim. So there's something in the Ruach, there's something in the alphabet, which is the only mechanism that he allowed Adam to grok what he was saying, to understand, to perceive, to get it at such a deep level of innate, intuitive yesness. Yeah. In other words, you need to synchronize with the frequency of the pure whole tone Ruach Merahefeting in Genesis 1 verse 2 in order to comprehend what even exists in the heavens or the earth. Is there a humanoid sitting on a throne with eyes like fire and white hair? Well, that's what it says in Revelation. You can believe whatever you want. You can believe that. I'm not going to deny that. But what you say graphically in English so that somebody can picture it is not necessarily the reality which is captured by the Hebrew words, which are translated in English. And if we back translate, we can see that it says something, which we'll probably have to do next week with, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, my Father. We'll get to that. But for now, let me read this this matter, bringing a number of things I just talked about last hour to a specific, call it an oration for a few minutes. So Dr. Stephen Greer talked about the speed of light in time-space is too slow, so there must be a quantum dimension of thought or consciousness where entanglement happens instantaneously, a synchronized resonance of communication, achad, pictured as the cymatic crystal. Now, a three-dimensional crystal, if you look at a two-dimensional drawing, that's black and white imagery, you might say a three-dimensional imagery would be a pile of sand, but this has to be in another dimension that's not limited by the 3 and 4 dimensions of time or space. So the Ruach of Elohim Merachefeting is the pure vibe resonance at the apex or crescendo of Tav Mem, which is the word in Hebrew for perfect, which is to say artless, naive, unaffected. So the kadosh, kadosh, kadosh that the angels say when they're going around the throne is the apex or the crescendo of Tomness. And so the question, if he then says in verse 3, Yahi or, was that a one-time thing, or is it prolonged and elongated and still resonating? If you hit a bell, dong, what causes the vibrations to cease? Well, they start moving and they move away because you haven't continued the source. Well, what if you continue a never failing, never ceasing source? Yahi or, did he ever stop it? There, what little I know in Sanskrit is this Om. Is that Hindu? Is that Sanskrit? Is that Buddhist? It's a human voice trying to recreate a tone. Om. Is that the tone of the bell ringing? Is that the tone of the or? Is that Hebrew? Is it limited to that? That's like trying to say what's the frequency or what's the color, which represents the ideal, the complete, the tom, the tav mem, tom. If it's a constant resounding, such that when he says that he is the Elohim who was and is to come, it's all simultaneous. Well, then it cannot be represented by a wavelength, because a wavelength, as we draw it two-dimensionally, is a dot and a wiggle. Well, that you have to have time, you have to have distance, you have to have space and time to portray that. So the real Ruach Merachefeting in Genesis 1 verse 2 could not be drawn as a wavelength. It just is a different dimension. You see, our minds are trapped in 1, 2, 3, 4 dimensions as we experience it. So if he says or, Aleph, Vav, Resh. It starts with Aleph, it ends in Resh, and Vav is in between, bringing the Aleph to the Resh. Or is Aleph the will to bring Vav to Resh? As a contractor, any contract has to have 4 elements. It has to have the first person doing something for the second person. So there's got to be an Aleph, first person, and Bet, other person. But in this contract that Aleph, where Yahuwah is determining for himself what he's going to be, who he's going to be, where his limitations, there is no other. So there's not 4, there's only 3. There's him taking something from one state to another state. Well, if he says, or, Aleph, Vav, Resh, the second state, which is the destination, the target, the goal, is Resh. Well, how's he going to get, or what's he going to get to Resh? It's got to be something represented by the Vav. It's Aleph, Vav, Resh. That's the word light. Be light. And there was light. No, that's not what it says. It says, Vayomer Elohim Yehi Or, Vayehi Or. Amer. Well, that's the word translated to speak. But if you look in the dictionary, it also means to have the mind, to think, to have the will, to have the intention. Well, that's the same as the Ruach. So the word Amer is an expression of the Ruach, not different from the Ruach. It's the Ruach somehow being, the Amering is the wiggling of the massless string of information. Not a different thing, it's the same thing. But Ruach, Resh, Vav, Chet, and Amer, Aleph, Mem, Resh, they're using a bunch of letters. So he had to invent the letters and empower them and place them in order, which has something to do with how they affect one another. So as we talked before, John 1:1, what's this word that he made before there was anything made? It's the Hebrew alphabet. It's got to be. But my point is, Resh isn't necessarily a destination of a place. It's a state of being, a frame of mind, or a state of heart. And therefore, it's a capacity, a potential, a possibility for the Vav condition to become the Resh condition, which by definition, Resh is drawn like a head of an exalted man. That's a metaphorical orthograph, a picture of victory, success, justice, and righteousness. But as soon as you say, yeah, Resh represents victory, success, justice, and righteousness, it automatically says there's an other, there's a bet to that Aleph, which is the opposite. Failure, unrighteousness. But as soon as you say Resh, well, we don't have to talk about the other, but it automatically, the other's there automatically. It's like as soon as you say Aleph, well, if it's a Chad, you can't even say Aleph. As soon as you say Aleph, you've identified it. As soon as you say here, you've identified that there's a possible there, which is not here. So he's built this universe such that as soon as there's something, there's everything else. As soon as you think of one letter of the alphabet, boom, all the other letters are automatically there, because that's the incredible word that he made. He had to have all of them all at once. And I've heard it said many times, the simplest way to explain that is the human eye. It can't have evolved because all the pieces have to work perfectly in conjunction and harmony, working functionally together completely at full value, Tav, Mem, Tom, or else it doesn't work at all. You can't evolve an eye. And then, so how do you get it back where it belongs? That was kind of the whole thing that drove this consideration. So for Vav to become Resh isn't a failing of the Resh, because Vav is the 6th letter and Resh is the 20th letter. So Vav is a pre-existing situation, a condition, but there's nothing wrong with it because it was made that way. But somehow the Vav just is. So Resh has to represent a potential, a capacity, a better than what it was before. So in any or for any Vav situation, the Resh is latent potential, patiently waiting for the opportunity to manifest. Not that there's anything wrong with the Vav. So on the chart, you'll see it says in the middle of the chart, caterpillar type Ben Yosef, Messiah Ben Yosef, and butterfly type Messiah Ben David. What does that mean? What's wrong with the caterpillar? Nothing. It's just a caterpillar. It's not yet a butterfly. It could become a butterfly unless somebody steps on it, a bird eats it. But the idea is, it's just being a caterpillar, man. There's no harm, shame, blame. But if the if the caterpillar eats the right greens and makes his cocoon sufficiently so that he can transcend the metaphorical 3 days and 3 nights in the crypt, he'll resurrect as a butterfly. And I say butterfly type Ben Yosef, or Ben David and caterpillar type Ben Yosef, because I've heard it said, I don't know, but I've heard it said, them rabbis, those guys who think about this stuff say, well, there appears in scripture to be the illustration of 2 messiahs, 2 Mashiachs. What does that mean? I don't know. It's them talking, but this is what I think they mean. 2 messiahs. Ben Yosef, the form of Joseph, you know, the one brother of the 12, son of Jacob, who was hated and despised, and they tried to kill him by throwing him in a pit with snakes and scorpions, and that didn't work. So then they sold him to the Ishmaelites, who sold him to the Egypt, and he was in the dungeon, and he ended up vizier, prime minister, as it were, of Egypt. That Joseph. And David, beloved, primary king of Israel, the butterfly type. Instead of eating greens, he's sucking nectar out of flowers flying from here to there. The point is, if the Reshness represents what Vav can become, then Vav isn't bad for not being Resh yet. That's just the possible future, but there's a barrier. There's 2 veils between Vav and Resh. There's 3 veils. There's the veil of death at the Zion, the next letter right after Vav in the alphabetic sequence. And then there's the crypt, the grave, the sepulcher, Chet, round rock. There's one blockade. And then there's this, in the Mishkan place, is the cover, the barrier between Memnun, the laver, the covered place where Samik Ayin Pei is inside them. There's the veil blocking, the 3rd barrier blocking the Ark of the Covenant, the Zadi. After Zadi Kuf, rise up. There's Resh then, after the Kuf. Resh, Shin Tav. Well, why isn't Shin or Tav the goal? Tav is the sign, there's the mark. Well, that's the mark. Yeah, it's kind of a target. We think of Tav or X marks the spot as the target, but it can also mean the conclusion, or there I can mean I promise. Sheen is a condition of radiant provision or shining of what? Resh. Resh is the status. Therefore, by analyzing the meaning of the letters, Resh is the goal of what? Well, there's only 2 letters that represent men. There's the Vav and there's the Resh. 2 letters represent weapons, the Zion and the Zadi. So if you look at what the letters are, you can start plugging in values and contemplating these things. So Vav to Resh man is put to the weapon at the Zion, but resumes, resurrects as a flying butterfly. So is or then a promise of, is or Aleph Vav Resh light? Or if Yahweh says, I'm the Aleph and I'm promising, well, now the promising is the Vav. I'm promising to get you to Resh. Who's he promising? Who are you talking about? There is no other. There's no bet yet. Is he talking to, the first bet is Yahusha? Hey, my son at my right hand. Is the father promising the son, I'm going to bring you from Vav to Resh? Or I'm going to give you the capacity to bring yourself from Vav to Resh. Remember Yeshua said, he gave me, my father gave me the right, the power, the privilege to lay my life down and take it up again. That's Vav man Zioning and then Zadi Kuf Reshing. He was hinting about this, or saying blatantly, but just not associated to the letters. By saying Yehi or, if what Yahweh is saying, I'm going to bring you, absolutely, I've raised my hand, Kaf Yod, 4, thus, Kaf Nun, yes, Chet Nun, by grace, or by the one who has the capacity, yielding it to somebody else to take advantage of. Chet Nun, Chen, grace, charming. If Yahweh says Yehi or, is he saying, I'm going to make myself known as the one who will Resh the Vav? We're going to translate it as the word light. Yeah, but then you miss all this other stuff. So the quantum entanglement then is that the quarks agree with Yehi or and synchronize as driven by the nefesh of Adam being in the state of betoch, which is trust and absolute certainty as an volitional intent. So Adam, human beings, us, were given the choice to betoch, trust securely and confidently, as an expression of our nephesh. That's what we're given to do. And if we do that, then all the quarks that make up the atoms by which Adam, Alef, Dalet, Mem, is composed in his body and his mind, which is a projection of the manifest of that word of John 1:1. And here we are. And as we synchronize back looking at him, so as we look back at the Father being the source of this resonance, this merechefeting ruach, the quantum entanglement that works at thought, not speed of light, it's beyond the physical, they're perfectly synchronized. So to do so would be to engage the action of Jeremiah 31:32, where Ephraim says, bring me back. line me up, calibrate my mind, my heart, my thoughts, my attitude, my voice, my song, and the retina should go boom, right back where it's supposed to be. The metal axle that's bent should be straight, and the birds should sing, and the lions not eat us as we lay in the woods. And then he says, I will write it on your heart. Jeremiah 31:20. Set up road markers for yourself. That's the word Zadi Yod Bet. Now he's known as Zavot, Zadi Bet Aleph Vav Tav. But Nun Zadi Bet is a knife handle stuck in the ground. So Zadi Yod Bet is to stick up a billboard. So to plant something and make it fixed, make it solid. That's like to have been exposed to my mystery. That's a Mad Basodi. A Mad is something, a pillar that's foundationed on the sod, on the hidden, that's right there and that can't be moved or shaken. And who built his life on the rock instead of the sand. The word Zadi Yod Nun is the word for a road marker. Make for yourself road markers, a billboard. To set up is the Zadi Yod Bet, the road marker itself, Zadi Yod Nun, but that's also shield. Zadi Yod Nun is the word for shield, which also means point out, distinguish, or characterize, which is what an Aleph Vav Tav is. So Yahweh's Avot is the one who's given the fixed characters to the Aleph Vav Tavs, the letters of the alphabet, who are his ruach, which he decided to be, this is who I am. I'm going to be this one represented by these symbols, and I will promise, I swear to do, only because there's no other yet. He's just saying, this is who I am. So it's a 3-letter projection and not a 4 mandate for a contract. So we're looking at Aleph Vav Resh. When he says Aleph Vav Resh, it's not let there be light. It's, this is me. For us to make a shield, a billboard, and keep ourselves on that track is what Jeremiah 31 is talking about. Jeremiah 31:20. So then Jeremiah 31:26, he says, just like I wasn't kidding, if you betray this, boom, you're kicked out of the land dead and crying and running from trouble. But if you come back, I wasn't kidding. It's all gonna work. It's all going to go back to where it was supposed to be. So that very thing that the astrophysicist and Stephen Greer were talking about, this idealized, but if we could find that right tune, then the Rife machine would work, and people would be getting healed and all. And like John G. Lake, he'd go into a hospital and they'd put a disease on his hand and the disease would die because he was so in tune. He'd touch people, speak to people, and people would be healed. He'd empty out hospitals up in Spokane 100 years ago. Really? Is that happening? So the only laws of Deuteronomy, merechefet, in order to make it echad, is to fit the connection, the communication as given, repeat back exactly. So if you translate something, or if you distort something, or if you pervert something, if you throw it into another language, if you throw it into another heart or different intent or different spirit, a different ruach, then whatever he said is not the same. So if he says Yehi or, what happens? Yehi or. If Yahushua said, I only say what I hear my Father saying, I only do what I see him doing. If the Father says Yehi or, then Yeshua says Yehi or. If you've seen me, you've seen my Father. There's more to it. We'll get to next week about that. But the point is, I could look at Yehi Or Vayehi Or as the voice of the Father and the voice of the Son. Yehi Or, Yehi Or. What's the difference? They're the same. And if that's his disposition, if he says, I'm going to be the guy known as, I'm Alef for the Vav to Resh. The word Shem means name, fame, renown, reputation, and occupation of all your concerns. Well, that is his concern. The occupation of all his concerns, that's Alef. And what is it? I'm going to make Vav Resh. Always, forever, every time. Every time I'm going to put the eyeball back where it belongs. Every time I'm going to raise the Vav man who's put to death to life of Resh. Every time, no matter who you think you are, insignificant, a scoundrel, detestable, worthless, that's your Vav state. I'm going to Resh you. That's the promise. That's his Shem. What's the Shem of Yahweh? Yehi Or. What's the Shem of Yeshua? Yehi Or. You know my name? You know my son's name? Yehi Or. When Yahweh says, I will Vav Resh, what does it mean? The Vav attachment. Vav is a nail, a hook, a bridge, a tow truck, a life flight. It's affection. It's chet noon. It's whatever it takes to connect him to whoever, whatever bet. Whatever bet did to not be Alef. It's just other. It's not its own fault. It's just otherness. So the Vav is the reattachment making bet into Resh. So bet is the other, which manifests as a human Vav. But the bet that was given otherness was allowed to determine for itself. And so Gimel is the tether between the Aleph and the bet. The right to determine, Dalet, hey, here's some information. You're allowed to connect, Vav, or disconnect, Zion. And then Chet. You'll be in that camp. If this... I'm going to vary off that for a moment. If the supreme, go back to the beginning, if the supreme status quo of Elohim rated at maximum calibration is the word Echad. In other words, what does Echad really mean? Well, one, unified. Listen, Elohim is infinite in all extents, in all capacities, in all possible imaginations. Echad is the infinite being of Elohim without bet, without other, without contention, without adversary, without, there's no son next to the Father. That's the Echad. And if that's the supreme status quo, what's Aleph or what's Echad plus? If it's already extremely infinite, how do you get plus? How do you get Echad 2.0? For all, when I was in football in high school, give 100%, 100%. No, that's not good enough. Give 110%. Whoa. Well, 100% rationally is everything. Nothing can be greater than 100%. But the football coach, give 110%. You know, it's like, well, if you got that other 10% to give, then when you thought you were given 100, it wasn't 100. It was actually only like 90, 95. And if you think you can give 110, that's your 100. See, logic doesn't fit. Math doesn't necessarily fit. This is ideas, ideologies. So if Echad is the infinite, pushed in every possible infinite option, how do you get Echad plus? Is it possible to get Echad 2.0? Does 2 plus 2 always equal 4, or might there be a universe or a multiverse where 2 plus 2 could actually equal 5? Same kind of thing. If the infinite oneness is existing or operating at 100%, what would 110% look like? That's Echad plus or Echad 2.0. Is Elohim limited, or can Elohim reach beyond 100%? Can Elohim make a rock or a weight too big for him to lift? If he's if he can do anything, can he give himself a limit? Well, if he's echad and everything's echad, if he's the bucket of mud, how can he stick something in which is not him? How can he change the echadness and make it the zimsum of a void where he's not there? Or is he still there even in the void? David said, even if in the grave you're there, where can I go that you're not there? Even in what looks like the place you're not there is there. So David was contemplating these same matters. If Elohim includes all expressions of infinite being, then what lies beyond? Can Elohim ever experience the seeing of a horizon? What's a horizon? The line that you can't see past. If he's echad, can you imagine him never? He invents the idea of horizon, but he'll never see it. He can't see it. He's echad. He's everything. Well, then within his echad is the lack. Oh, you're everything, but you can't see the horizon. Too bad for you. You're lacking something. To do so, would Elohim have to pull a trick on himself by closing his eyes or by tying one hand behind his back in order to experience a thrill like seeing the horizon, or a thrill like anything that he hasn't experienced? He's infinitely echad. What did he not experience? He has to pull a trick on himself in order to reduce himself. That's the other meaning of the word dalit, by the way, is to reduce oneself, to hang down loosely and become vulnerable. So I could read that that's Yeshua's mission, voyaging as a dalit to be born of a woman, is to put himself into this capacity. Would he, could he, should he plug himself into a limited format just, let's say, just to experience the exuberance of discovery? He who is echad with everything and infinite can never discover anything because he's already echad. So he wants to experience something he's never experienced. He creates a void so he can plug himself into the void and be something he's never been. That's echad 2.0. So the thrill of experience, or the thrill of discovery, is beyond the now, which by definition is echad plus, or perhaps even echad minus. In order for this universe to exist, we as atoms experience it. The concept of life had to be invented first as the opposite of death, because for him to invent this thing called life, there was no life. It wasn't an obvious. He invented what we call life. His echadness didn't include any of that. And as soon as he creates life, the opposite of life is an obvious matter of fact, which is death, the not life thing. Hence, Adam's warning not to eat of the fruit as the first order of business. And of course, the Almighty, El Shaddai, would have to overcome all adversaries, or else he's not mightier than anything. He has to create for himself some monster to fight the monster and win. You could be a big bad guy, but there's nobody that's threatening you or challenging you, then it means nothing. You can be brave, but if there's nothing scary, your braveness means nothing. You can say I'm honest, but if there's no coercion to lie or to hide, your honesty is worthless. It means nothing. So the biggest monster he might face would have to be his own demise. Not limbo, a pure and total death, final kaputsky. Kaputsky? Is that Yiddish? Is that Russian? I mean, kaputs. Q-P-T-Z, kaputs. Well, look it up. Just for fun. Kuf Pei Zadi means drawn together, shut, jump suddenly. A spring like a rat trap, or jumping on a trampoline, cut a journey short. So for him to come down from heaven to earth as a man who would be crucified and cut the journey short like a rat trap, bam, suddenly, whoa, hey, they come down here for the celebration of Pesach. Next thing you know, he's hanging on a cross and he's dead and he's in a grave. That's kaputsky, man. The definition of the word. Real, genuine, dead. Unless the infinite almighty can't do that. If he's infinite and almighty, he can certainly make his own death. But yeah, but what if that totally killed him? He had to run that risk. But somehow he knew that wouldn't happen. Or he gave himself the capacity for it to wouldn't really happen, but he had to give himself the capacity to be really dead. I mean, this is all just ideas of thoughts, right? So imagine, if you can, the one with everything, infinite and infinitely more than infinite, already by the very nature of his being, tasks himself to go beyond infinite, unbounded infinity. How do you do that? He must first establish the measurement of less than optimal and the advantaged accomplishment status to be attained as beyond the present, in a good way, whatever that means. Well, that's Vav Resh. For him to experience more than a Chad infinite is putting himself into the Vav position so that he can experience the Resh position. So this is his own game. Upon conceiving of such a wild concept, then, he must thoroughly identify all its quirks, envelop it, fathom it, cause it to exist, bring it both to idea and essence, and experience it and conquer it himself. And then imagine, if you can, that this consideration is such a thrill for him, such an invigoration, a plus, beyond his present infinite totality of Echadness, that he decides to invent or create other creatures to enjoin him on the same thrill ride as he discovers it to be greater than his existence as infinite Echadness. It's infinite Echadness plus, Echad 2.0. This experience, putting himself into the Vav to become the Resh, is so great, it's better than infinite Echadness. But wait, there's more. Just think, if 2.0 is possible, then what about 3.0, 4.0, 10.0, a jillion, gazillion point oh? I mean, how many times can he amp this thing up? So now that the concept exists, it becomes a law of nature, like a mathematical equation, a theorem, a formula of chemistry, or a plotted program of physics, something which can be identified, calibrated, indexed, formulated, registered, mapped, learned, fractally exaggerated. And then the very formula is used as a platform or machine to produce, by reproducing itself fractally in an infinitely compounded fractal of fractal, with every possible permutation, never failing to perform the formula as permanently the future by which all else references its origin, its measure, its essence being an expression variant of the pure form elemental. Everything that exists is a fractal picture of this same Alef vaving to Resh. Everything that exists, everything in the universe, everything in the everything everywhere. Angels and demons and planets and fish and birds and everything, electrons and protons, it's all a manifest of the same wonderful exhilaration that he determined to be beyond the betterness, the goodness of the simply Echad, simply infinitely Echad. And then the very formula, what's in the Alef Bet. So if you could imagine yourself being Elohim, with such a big idea that you wanted to express it succinctly, simply, elegantly, romantic. The word romantic is ideal in simple elegance, unadorned, without frill or filigree or artistic embellishment, a minimalist expression upon which all the accoutrements of artistry and poetry could easily be elaborated. It would actually invite such adornment, greedily, voraciously crave and yet demand a blossoming expression. But yet the minimal, the sublime, the voiceless, simple heartbeat, but not really its heart, but its heartbeat, alive with its own beingness, a fractal expression of its own fractal skeletonness. See, this is all describing the Ruach Merahefeting, which is the Alef Bet, which is the secret formula, the teeth on the key is the meaning of the letters. So if you're the creator of such a thing, how would you express the heartbeat of its heartbeat? Reduce, minimize, pure essence. What is life? Where is life? Life doesn't even exist yet. Life is the encapsulation of this formula, the true manifestation of the formula without blemish, being Tom, Tav Mem. So death and falseness, corruption and disintegration must also exist as the counter expressions to the ideal of the full true expression. So if life is the concept, which is the yield of the formula in pure expression, what is the concept of choosing the life or opting out by choosing not life? So then the free agency of choice is invented. Choose life or choose death. It's a wide open personal determination for every Alef, every entity, every person or creature or self that he is allowed to be invented or exist. So what gives distinction to the option of choosing? A distinction evidentially contrary opposing variance. What is distinction? Something bet other than Alef, other than Alef. What is the differentness? See, Yahweh complains that his priests didn't make the distinction known to the people between the kadosh and the halal, between the sacred and the profane, between the clean and the unclean. This concept of bet is not Alef. And so for somebody to say, Jesus is the Father, okay, you don't get it. You don't understand kadosh versus halal. You can tell right there that they completely lost by making a comment like that. They have a logic, but it's errant. His whole thing is distinction. You can't identify Alef without bet. Bet is other, which is distinct. And so because bet, now Alef exists. So there is either the whole alphabet or there was none of the alphabet, but it's all in the alphabet. A mind needs to be invented to do the task of comparison and choosing, and bring that down, reduce, minimize, pure essence, and simple, so a self can determine for itself life or death, success or fail, bless or curse, knowing or ignorance, seeing or blind. The self needs to be informed, needs to be given that hey to allow for a rational self-interest, rational, logical, determinable, quantifiable, qualifiable. Needs to be able to, the self needs to be allowed the space and time to gather info, assess the tally, determine a call, and state the position for oneself. That's actually all the letters between Aleph and Zion, which is Shemen-ing, which is Erik-ing. Shemen is the word oil, and to say the 5 bridesmaids didn't have oil and the 5 did, that's a distinction of that action right there. It all starts with the task Elohim set for himself. Echad plus. Echad 2.0. He or. Invent the system, formulate the pattern, state the essence. Using the system, the pattern, the essence, build a place. This is the Zimzum picture, the Kuf picture. Put things in the place, in place. Put things in the place, also according to the system, pattern, essence. So when you find a word that says, determine things value, and then the value in order within the system, which is the word that we talked about last week. It was that exact definition. Forget which word it was, but it was one of the last words we talked about last week. And then cause or allow or provide for, let, when he says, let it be, or let there be light. That word let is to cause, allow, or provide for, each to be and express the full spectrum of possibilities, also according to the system, pattern, essence, which is the meaning of the fractal, and then inform them all. This is what he did. He created the Kuf picture, the Zimzum, of there's the universe, there's the creatures, the beings, the things inside, and then somehow he informs them all that he is the Yehi Or, that he is, that everything, all of them are the expression of the system, pattern, essence. Everything that exists, all you guys, you're the expression of this thing at full measure, which is John 1:1 or John chapter 1. And the best thing you could do for yourself or make of yourself or experience as you, your own self beyond yourself, as beyond infinity, as going further than forever and ever, and yet they get to choose for themselves as you did for yourself, yes or no, in or out, life or death, connect or disconnect. It's all written there in the first 7 letters. And then following after, there's 8, there's chet. Well, there's all kinds of stuff after the chet contained within the chet, and that's in the Mishkan pattern. That's another subject. But here now for yourself, choose life or death, blessing or curse, in or out, of or against, connect or disconnect. What's he saying by these first 7 letters? But what's the upshot? Where's all this going? If dead is dead and life is life with something following after, that's inside the chet, that's where the life is described, then what's it pointing at? What's the target, the goal, the ideal, the sought after driving force? For the Vav to proceed through this by choosing life to become the Resh. It's a goal, a thing, a measure, an experience, an assessment, a discovery, the thrill of discovery, the satisfaction of achievement, the resonance of pleasure. All that's the Resh. So for lack of a better description, say a minimalist expression of that task of assess the option of life or death, determine the choice you make for yourself, and then engage the experience of your choice. Okay, let's take those 3 ideas and put them into letters. If you were to look around and assess the options of life and death, Adam was told, eat the fruit, you die. I've already given you life, eat the tree of life. He's looking around, he has to weigh, measure, consider. That's like the meaning of the letter ayin. Determine the choice you make for yourself. Well, that's dalit, that's making the decision, a fork in the road. And then engage the experience of your own choice. Well, that's noon. Well, that's ayin dalit noon. What does that spell? Eden, the Garden of Eden. So in the Garden of Eden, it wasn't just the Garden of Delight, it was the garden where that's the task that Adam had to make for himself, which is following in the footsteps of the dilemma that Yahweh had. Does he stay echad or does he make it echad plus? Alef dalit noon. The choice of Alef dalit noon is to go beyond the present limitation. Death is the choice to cease to exist. If you choose death, forget about any more, you're done. Goodbye. But if you choose life, this moment of choice is only the beginning of a journey, a trek, a mind-blowing experience, tracing the steps that Elohim took for himself to voyage from here to where? Just beyond what? Beyond this. So Vav, Resh represents just, it's no longer Vav. If everything's echad, then echad plus is just not echad. It's what? It's that voyage of the great unknown. Something better, where you yourself are better, where you yourself are more, and it's good, it's pleasurable. It's fulfilling and rewarding and self-satisfying. All that's represented by Resh. Just as it was and is for Elohim himself to experience and fractally to actually be that notion. Elohim was so enthralled with the idea, the formula, the strategy of beyond infinity, of forever and ever, of echad on steroids, that he took it on as his identifying feature. Not just creator, not just owner, not just all-powerful or most high or ultimate Mr. Big, but I am the pattern, the heart of hearts, where the heartbeat is experienced, or the exhibition as each realization of it is enlightened, step by step, piece by piece. And not only that I adorn myself dressed up in the pattern, but the exclusiveness of my thrill being about this pattern is that no other measurement or calibration will do or will suffice to reference me by. It's the grandest scheme of all schemes, the most elaborated and celebrated endeavor of all endeavors. It's gadol ma gadolim. And to make it my task, my occupation, at risk of true death, total failure, yet knowing I can die and bring myself back to life, is greater and more heroic than the infinite achadness in and of itself, gabor megaborim. And so very much so that the epitome of myself in relationship to every other, with every and any other person or creature I will bring into existence, the dynamic of relationship can only and ultimately be expressed as I will bring you to me here in this same manner, the same way, the same experience as myself. By myself, for myself is this, from echad to echad plus. My offer is to you, I give you, help you, encourage, enable, provide for you, facilitate you, your transcendence from now to then, from here to there, from dark to light, from death to life, as unfit to supreme, from unseemly to exponentially successful. You choose for yourself life. I will make it my identity and intention to get you from where you are, being a subject of inadequacy, to the embodiment of virtue, ennoblement, exalted, celebrated capability. My only concern, all my attention, all of my being for your sake, all my best for your accomplishment of the transition by your working, your own working at the prevailing, as I work to prevail for myself. You, just like me, I create you to kill yourself. And because you had chosen life and not chosen death, the formula, the pattern, the plan, the fractal by which everything exists allows, demands, ensures by its very nature that you yet live. Every event, every situation, every thought, every emotion, every encounter, relationship, for every detail in every way, the existing status can and will be brought to, propelled to, is launched to plusness, advantage. The Resh. Benefit, purpose, potential realized, matter of fact, no question, no compromise, no reneging. Every body, every life, every circumstance, every communication, every molecule of expression of energy is designed by, geared for, and operating according to my identity and oath. According to this regard, I will transition to embellishment. And as stated, my actual embellishment is to ensure you are as myself. Your transition is my only attention. So if you are the one making this statement, as oath, as promise, as declaration of identity intent, that's Aleph, as well as sworn vow to accomplish, that's the Vav, as well as the root fundamental formula by which all that exists has its being composed of, how would you express it in terms of the three elements? I myself, there's the Aleph, vow, enforce, enable, yoke my resources to your accomplishment. For you who would choose life, you who would choose to connect, to be, to become echad with me, there's the Vav, and the Resh, bring you to the echad plus. Promise your life beyond the present experience. Vow your confidence in me is not possibly betrayed, because I must be first. What you become, so I will become first, as you apart from me, and then pave the way as one of your condition to become echad with me in the superlative position. The echadness with me, following after my successful venture, is sustainment of the life my essence affords. To the degree that you vary from the pure essence of echadness, you fall away from the synergistic resonance of the frequency generated by the merachefeting ruach in Genesis 1:2. The perfect echad is no distortion, is crystalline cymatics in every dimension. Mitzvot, chokim, edot, torot, mishpat, zadika, emet, amina, like a rung, like each one of those words, which are commands and stipulations that he gave us, are rungs of the ladder, which is chet vav kuf, by which to maintain or make correction back to the pure tone merachefeting resonance. Same heart, same voice, same zeal, same vision, same love, same life, achad. And what is love? Aleph hey bet hey. I will give. Hey bet is the give. Hey bet is the word translated give. Aleph, I give, and hey is that which is expressed. The evidence of what I give is the meaning of love. I will give. I am the embodiment. I adorn myself with the same ornamentation, bejeweled alike, both of us. As Yeshua said, I only do what I see my Father doing. I only say what I see my Father saying. So what you see of me is seeing my Father. So then, as he, Yahweh, declares himself to be Elkanah, powerfully jealous, zealous, fanatical, and thrilled by his own stuff, so I, like Yahusha, can determine for myself to be similarly enthralled by the same stuff and can be charged up about keeping his ways. Please teach me, tell me what else I can do. What can I do more to be pure tone echad? What is that vibe? Is it a note? Is it a certain hertz frequency? Is it a color? Is it a light? Is it something that can be measured and graphed in time and space, like the 528? Or is it in this other dimension? What is that pure time resonance of Merech Hefeting Ruach, which will organize, orchestrate, calibrate, generate, and resurrect conformity to the original, perfect, acceptable, pleasing, Tov, paleo format? What sound can an Adam, Aleph Dalet Mem, say to, project from his mouth to expel parasites and impurity? What is the greatest thing a person can say that locks us into that uniform synchronicity? Hodu la yuah ki tov, ki leolam chazdo, Yahuwah Elohi. What more can I say? What else can I do? Anything more would be less, would be my vain struggle beyond his proficiency. And that phrasing is where the Christian church has said things that sound like that, which are absolutely accurate. The maximum encapsulation of command given to us, like the shirt I was wearing the other week, Shema, Shomer, Asa, whilst ahaving Yahweh Elhi, Ehyeh. Everything else is details. The purest example, or the purest cymatic, graphically geometric structure, think about this, the purest cymatic, graphically geometric structure expressed by Elohim is Yahusha, Ben Adam, John 1. See, if I think two-dimensional, it's a picture, a squiggle, a geometric. If I make it 3D, but in its pure multidimensional phase, it's the human being, the man, the Adam, Ben Adam Yahusha. It's a projection. The purest voice is Yahusha speaking, Matthew 5. Thus, the purest I can do is speaking his words. Hodu, for me to say Hodu la yuaki tov, is not quoting a scripture of a command. It's a present expression of pure heart, which would be Bet Resh He, Lamed Bet He, Bara Lava. For me to say Hodu la yuah is me being, generating, not just quoting, not just reading a Siddur prayer book, but by radiating the light from this source as it's given to do so. Yahuwah Elhi is the simplest, purest voice of Adam, Achad, Ayin Mem, Yahweh, Ayin Mem, with, as his people. Just to say the word Yahuwah Elhi, which is why we've talked about that so many times. It's a state of mind, it's a state of heart, it's a state of being, it's a state of the resonance, it's the purest cymatic, geometric, multidimensional structure is for Adam to speak those words. Unadorned, unembellished, undoctrinated, unmusicified, no extra notes of music added. It's pure anguish, pure pathos. It's pure mem aleph dalitness. For an aleph dalit mem, an Adam, a person to say Yahuwah Elohi. to Shin Bet on Shin Bet Tav, to sit on Shabbat, to Ayin Dalet on Mem Vav Ayin Dalet, to bear witness of keeping the Moedim, to Koli Kolo, to my voice be the same as his voice. That's the same as the word hodu, resounding, reverberating, echoing, agreeing, praising his honor, confessing our error, proclaiming thanks, exalting his majesty, exuberant exaltation. That's in that hodu. His Shem Hagadol Kadosh, Ezekiel 36:23. His name, fame, renown, reputation, his Shem, his occupation of all his concerns, of which he gave us Kufnun Hey, builder thus possessor of heaven and earth. Kufnun Alef, jealous and zealous about his stuff. And what's his stuff? What is the high celebrated Gadol, festooned, beribboned, braided, the great plan to be Achad 2.0, to be the Alef who goes from Vav status Alef to Resh status Alef. That's his great Shem. I will connect the destination. Resh is the flag, the mountain, the pregnant object, the focus, the head. Aleph Vav Resh then, or translated light, is a vow of the expression of destiny for the betrothed. Because see, if we say Aleph Vav Resh, why isn't it Sheen or Tav? We talked about Sheen. Sheen is the quality aspect of Resh, but Resh, Sheen, Aleph Resh, Sheen, Tav is the word betrothed. The Tav is the promise, the Sheen is the conditions, but Resh is the destination. So Aleph Resh Sheen literally means expression or betrothed. Sheen, Resh Sheen means licensed, authorized, permitted. So I could look at that and say, for the betrothed who choose life, who ahav Yahweh El Heka, who love Yahweh their Elohim, this is an expression of destiny. Aleph Vav Resh. So it was said to be, so it be. Yehi or? Absolutely, Yehi or. And it's the ongoing, never stopped. It wasn't he said and it was. Bad English, ruin your thinking. Full spectrum white light, constant. It's not which color, which hertz frequency is the one that'll heal you. It's the fractal whole, not a fraction of a partial. So I mentioned in another video that I heard a guy on the radio, I forget his name, but it was a famous Christian speaker, pastor guy. When he was a kid in summer Bible camp thing, you know, the kids are all goofing around, the speaker's up in front of the stage, nobody's paying attention to him. So finally he pulls a dollar bill out, and like say it's almost like pulling out a $100 bill or a 20 these days, and he holds it up and says, does anybody want this? And no kids are paying attention. They're all goofing around. And does anybody want this? And all of a sudden, the guy who was speaking, him being the kid, was in the very back row goofing around with his friends and thought, what? And he sees this. It's like, what am I beholding here? And he takes off out of the seat and runs up, and he's just a little kid. And he said he put his foot on the guy's knee and leapt up in the air and grabbed that dollar bill out of that preacher's hand. That's Kufnun Aleph. If you go to the Aaronic benediction, one phrase said, Yirah Yahweh Panav Aleka, and it's translated, may he illuminate his countenance. Illuminate his countenance. Well, illuminate, that's light, is Aleph Vav Resh. A-I-R, air is where we get air in English, kind of like Aleph Yod Resh, but air can facilitate illumination, fractal or refraction, but this is the word Yod Aleph Resh. That's not the word light. Do they just drop the Vav out between the Aleph and the Resh? Yod prefix means he will. Aleph Resh, Yar, Yahweh, Yar, Yahweh, Pranav Leka. Penav, penun vav, it means his face, but the word face also means variety, sort, type, kind, or to give regard, turn his face. Penun means to turn away from being, it means like a bachelor or like going away on vacation. Hey, I'm not listening anymore. You guys can yell and scream. I'm not paying attention to you. Pay attention to me. What? Ephraim wants to come home? What do I see? That's the word face. Face means to turn away or turn towards, depending on the circumstances. Alekam is to raise you up, is to turn towards regarding you with such favor, to raise you to a higher status. That's the Resh. See, if you know this, then you can go back and reanalyze the Aaronic benediction. But what's Yod Aleph Resh? Tav Aleph Resh. Yod means pertaining to form or appearance or as an adjective. Tav Aleph Resh, form, outline, figure, shape, pretty similar to Zadi Resh. Appearance, quality, title, or degree. How to describe something. That's not the word illuminate, but if you illuminate something, then you can see it. What is he illuminating? Well, let him illuminate his face. See, this isn't talking about turn a flashlight on his face or let him shine his shining face on you. So Moshe's face was shining when he's up on the mountain. See, that's what we see, but there's more going on with this. Quality, title, degree. It also, Tav Aleph Resh means surrounded, encompassed, or encircled, like the word saviv. Saviv, kadosh, kodashim. So embellished, adorned, ornamented. Hey, that's the same as Aleph, Dalet, Resh, and Ayin, Dalet. That's what this word described or figurated by music. Well, that's like taking the grains of sand that are in disarray and putting them to a perfect geometric, cymatic relief. Oh, hey, there, look. That's what he's doing. So this Yar Yahweh Panav Aleka is saying, may he let his identity of what turns his face be realized by you, so that you will see illuminated who he is, what he is, in such a way that you can be who you are supposed to be, which is to be just like him. He says Yehi-ar, you say Yehi-ar. Yeshua said, I only say what I hear him saying. Let there be light, and there was no, that's bad English. Yehi-or, Yehi-or. If he says, my moedi are these things in Leviticus 23, then I could say, my moedi are these things in Leviticus 23. See, it's this consciousness of appropriate relationship, fit together like a finger joint, exactly matching, which is the nature of the Mishkan pattern. So if the father's voice is Yehi-or, then the son's voice is Yehi-or. Then what's his Shem? His name, fame, renown, reputation? The Shem of the father then is Yehi-or. Shem of the son is Yehi-or. We're at the end of 2 hours, so I'm going to stop here, but I'm just going to give you a little teaser for next week. O little town of Bethlehem, how still we see thee lie. Hey, what are you doing bringing up them Elohim Achrim for, dag nabbit? No, wait a minute. What does that mean in English? O little town. What's a town in Hebrew? Well, Bet Tov is the word for daughter or maiden, but it's also a village under the authority, the covering of a city. So it doesn't have its own government or services. The bigger city provides for it. That's the one under the cover, the shadow, is the little town, the Bet Tov. But Ayin Yod Resh is also a city or a village. Ayin Yod Resh. Look up in the dictionary, Ayin Yod Resh, Ayin Vav Resh, Ayin Resh Kaf. There's that word Eric. What's it mean? How do you do it? A little town, Bethlehem, Bet Tov Lamed Chet Mem, Bet Lechem. Bet Tov or Bet Yodtov means daughter of, or the house of. Lachem is bread, but Lachem is also battle and war and conflict. Aggressive debate. Why is there always argument when the family gets together talking religion and politics? Daggone it. It's Bethlehem, that's why. How still, yet, even after 2,000 years, we see you lying. Oh, no, wait a minute. No, we see you composed. You shouldn't be composed. I and Resh, wake up! Active, lively debate, contend for the truth. Lying, misrepresenting the Messiah, misrepresenting his Father's voice, misrepresenting the Torah, misrepresenting reality, misrepresenting the distinction between life and death, between the Kadosh and the Rachal, the clean and the unclean. Little freaking town of Bethlehem, why will you deceive after all this time, yet and still? Because we don't care. We'll talk about that next week. And one other thing, as I mentioned before, if you've seen me, you've seen my Father. My Father and I are one. If you've seen me, what's the word if in Hebrew? Alef mem, could be kaf yod. It's Alef mem, that's the word mother. See, Resh Alef hey. See, exhibition, allow to perceive or understand, appeared to be, approved of, he chose, preferred. He showed himself, worthy, fit, and suitable. Who's Yeshua's mother? Mary, Miriam. Was she a harlot? We have the narrative record in the gospel that Joseph thought that she was hanging with somebody else, and so he's like, I'm going to put her away. It's like, and the angel Gabriel showed up and said, no, this is of Elohim. I know a lot of people don't believe that. I know a lot of people think no freaking way is Yahweh himself going to invade another man's wife, take the bridal prerogative, and impregnate her before Joseph could be with her. That's criminal. Is Yahweh that kind of scoundrel? Did Mary get impregnated by Joseph? And Yeshua really is human? On the condition of, according to the condition that you trust my mother impregnated by her husband, or as a handmaid of service to her master. Well, wait a minute, that almost looks like Hagar compared to Sarah. Explain the riddle if you understand how my Father shows himself to be understood accurately. If you've seen me, you've seen my Father. If. The condition of my mother, what happened to his mother? How did Mary become pregnant? If you can answer how Mary became pregnant, you'll understand my Father. See, it doesn't read that way in English. But if you plug the Hebrew words in, that's exactly what it says. So Yeshua wasn't saying, I and my Father are the same person, the same one. If you've seen me, you've seen my Father. Well, because they say the same voice. Only the Father's not speaking. The Father's not visible. He's invisible. And we don't hear his voice. We hear Yeshua's voice, because if the Father says Yehi or, Yeshua says Yehi or. See, this whole thing is interwoven. But if the word means mother, and Aleph Mem, Ayin Mem is nation, people, meaning with, but Aleph Mem means mother or nation or metropolis. But Aleph Mem Hey can also mean the mother or the motherhood, but it also means handmaid. Well, that sets up this picture of Abraham. Abar, Abar, Aleph Bet Resh means to fly. So if you look at a doorway, because Aleph Mem Hey is also the post that hold up the lintel, the header. So Abraham is this header, but he was lifted up, provided sons by these two women. One was his beloved wife, and the other one was the handmaid. Aleph Mem Hey, Aleph Mem Hey, holding up Abraham. If you can tell me the riddle, then you'll know my Father. What does that mean? Well, that's something we can talk about next week. I'll try to get these things sent in to you guys, but that's on page 14, and there's 16 pages. Anyway, we better end this here and then have the time we can let you guys talk about this stuff if you want. Somebody want to close up?
Yes. All right, so first of all, Abba, we praise thee and we thank thee for allowing us the iron to recognize that we really don't know much, yet we ask for thy strength and thy loving instruction and guidance so that we may continue asking the questions and coming to thee. Father, that one day we may confidently and steadfastly respond to thee, Father, when thou says, Ehie or, we may respond, Ehie or. We praise thee and we thank you, Abba Yahweh. By thy name in grace, Yahusha. Amen.
Amen.